Shmallow everyone! For today's video, I wanted to see if I could make my own little video on advice for artists, or what I guess makes an artist who they are. In actuality, it's more like a love letter to my younger self. I'll be going over things like a bullet list and then going on to explain them. And then I thought, why not have other people's ideas, you know what I'm saying? So let's just include a few other artists I know.
Hi, my name is Dino. I go by she, they pronouns, and I am a black artist who specializes in diverse skin tones and diverse body types.
Hello, this is Kano, the cryptid VTuber, or better known as Kanovore, and today I will be answering a few questions.
Now, as credibility, I can say that I'm an artist through and through. I've waded through the traditional sphere, the posting on Instagram every day sphere, and the what's my art style sphere. Let's see, at first, I started off being an artist off and on from elementary school until I'd say mid-high school. Back in elementary school, I kind of got jealous of this one girl who drew Miku better than anything, and then I got petty, and I just started drawing. I then started drawing, the most, I guess you could say, the blockiest of blockiest characters. But hey, I had fun. Then in middle school, I kind of stopped a bit and picked up the pencil back up in high school again. But at that time, I didn't plan to make it a big part of me, really. After a few more years of me looking at other people's work, wishing I had taken AP art, and one artist alley friend, also community college and a bachelor's degree, later, here I am, being an artist I'm proud of. Now, I can say as an artist, it's been a tough road full of envy and struggle, but I honestly wouldn't be where I am without going through those trenches. There's just no easy way around it, in my opinion. I firmly believe that sometimes slumps are important and needed so we don't get too lazy and grow in our craft. It may be scary and sometimes downright depressing, but it's a phase that will always come back whether we want it to or not. But enough about the sad stuff. I'm here to give you about some tips to young me when I was an adorable budding artist. Okay, number 1. Thin line art isn't for everyone. Okay, P.S. This kind of touches a little bit on art style actually. Okay, I know that a good chunk of us became an artist because of the anime we watched. I remember wanting to draw like this one artist called Hina Natsu, and also from an anime just like Inuyasha and Ranma and all that stuff. Going back to Hina Natsu, she had this type of art style that looked very anime-esque and was really pleasing to look at with the colors and everything, and I want to draw like her really bad. But for some reason, I just could not do it for the life of me. Sure, I got the line down, but then it'd be too wobbly. I know the whole concept of it being like the flick of the wrist and just having experience through practice, but it just wasn't working. Like the line art was not line arting, okay? I tinker with the stabilization and then keep doing the same hand movements trying to get that perfect line, and it was just all so frustrating. At some point, I realized that there are some styles you can replicate and there are just some that you just really can't. And not because you're bad at it, but because it might not be the style that fits you comfortably. In my opinion, there are some styles that you can utterly fall for, but you just can't really remake it. And then there are some that you can confidently say that you can sort of get the hang of it and create it. Well, this is all to say that it's okay if you can't get that perfect style you want. I mean, eventually your style, or line art in this case, even transforms to another version of the style you're emulating or producing. The best part is that it makes it all unique in the end. And so in my journey of line art, I moved on to line weights, okay? This was my second phase. I tried to make my lines more bolder, like those found like in a graffiti or something like in a panty and stocking. During that time, I realized that my line art will have trouble looking thin, so, why not make it bold and expressive? I liked how some artists made their artwork look so vibrant and very expressive with their line work, and well, things were okay for a bit, and then the issue with the line control became a problem again. I could do thick line work, but the issue was that my wobbly lines would just show itself. Fun fact is that by nature, my handwriting really isn't the best, so I think that may have added a little bit in that issue. Most of the time, it took a lot of work to get that good line stroke without me having to erase something and go back. At that point, I also realized that I kind of didn't want to be putting too much work than I should be in art, you know what I'm saying? After finally getting the hang of the style, I felt like I understood how I'd like it to be drawn and rendered. I personally still feel like I'm still in this type of phase personally when it comes to drawing characters. But as I've drawn more and more, I feel that my style is definitely changing and transforming. And now I bring into my third stage. Okay, I think after a long while of stressing over line art, I started to, well, just not care anymore. I gotta tell you, if something isn't working with you after trying different avenues, it just gets so frustrating. But I still didn't want to give up, and so I looked through other types of artworks I liked, and also just practiced around with what my hand felt comfortable drawing. Then I fell for the, I don't know how to explain, like the almost lineless style with a hint of added textures. One major example would be the designs in Bravely Default, the game. The designs were very sketchy, but still had a sense of solidity and just had a nice balance. So it was very loose looking, but the details in the outfits made up for it and grounded it pretty well. So with this artist in mind and a few others, I started to, well, finesse it and work towards what I saw from the artist. To me, that meant doing a rough draft to get the pose and flow out of my head, and then doing a rough draft where I would then tinker with it and make it the official line art through that, and then building up from there. Hey, I hope that makes sense. That's how my artwork is right now. By the end of my line art, I go back and erase some of it to give it that sketchy, almost lineless feel. This is all to say that you're gonna go through phases. You gotta first realize what's not working for you, and then what's also making you agitated, and then also what's fighting against you. Sometimes you can wrangle it in and tackle it in your own way, but if it's not something that you can say you enjoy tackling, then that's the part where I think you need to confront. For example, I make my line art sketchy because I like that kind of style, but sometimes it works against me, especially when it comes to things like anatomy. But then again, I like taking my time to get the vision I want. Kind of balances out. Funny part is that when people try drawing in a certain style, they don't know that they're also adding in their own twist to it over time. Like, for example, we can both draw an anime eye, but in the end, I may draw the lashes more curvy while you may draw it more downturned. It doesn't matter if it doesn't look good at the first time. You'll go through your phases and find the spot where you want to be at.
When it comes to using thin line arts, I would say that it is something that kind of depends on the project that I'm working on. Let's say I'm doing an illustration and it calls for me doing thin lines, then that is just what I do. But if it's something like a chibi, I prefer to do a little bit thicker lines. It just really depends on the project itself. I can do thin lines and I can do thicker lines. Neither one are harder than the other. They each have their own challenges, and they each have their own drawbacks, and of course they each have their own pros. Personally, for me, I really enjoy being able to mix and mash thinner and thicker lines together. I've done it plenty of times in my work. It's something that I really strive for. I believe that it brings about a very beautiful contrast.
What do you think about using thin line art? Would you say it is easy for you to draw, or do you think it depends on what you're making at the time? I am really used to using thin line art when I'm creating a drawing. However, I do feel like using thicker lines is easier, and also depending on what style you want, you might want to use thicker lines. But I'm really used to using very thin lines for my art, and I do prefer thin lines.
Tip number 2, don't be scared to use other colors than darker shades to render something. Now, okay, color theory is something I know about 50% of the people know and 50% people don't. Me, I'm in the 50% people that don't know. In my defense, I had the usual basic color class in high school, and well, obviously that wasn't enough. When I drew back then, I didn't really have a lot of coloring stuff, and I mainly used traditional tools like, paper and lead pencil. I know, you shouldn't be using lead pencil, but it is what it is. Anyway, so I think it was hard for me to shift to view of color. I quite literally shaded with my pen and felt it from the big line. That little felt pen, yeah, that. But that was the problem. The moment I shifted into digital, I had a hard time picking colors. They were either too light, too saturated, or just too downright bland. It got pretty bad because while I didn't use black for shadows, it still felt pretty flat no matter what I did. I tried adding in red, still flat. Tried, light hues to make it more dimensional, still flat. It wasn't until like a year or so into digital art that I learned of certain colors and how to manage them. It's why I'm kind of geared, or I prefer warm tones, because that set of colors was pretty easy to use. Now, green, to be honest, is still a mission. It took a lot of experimenting, honestly. Currently, I still am struggling, but I combat that with upping the intensity and saturation levels. But then again, that depends on the object of which you are coloring or shading too. Picking a color to shade with isn't so bad either. It doesn't even have to be purple. I've used reds before, I've used blues, all kinds of colors, except for green. It's really all about knowing how to balance a certain color with other colors. It helps create the vibe or idea you want to show. All this is to say, have fun with colors and goof around with them. Use that color wheel and fiddle with it. You never know what you can make something look like. For example, when people look at my pieces, I've heard like very nice comments saying that it's very colorful, but behind the shield, that was through trials. Most of the time, I don't know what I'm doing, if it makes you feel better, honestly. And after gaining more experience, I started to look at tutorials and learned of complementary colors. But that's neither here nor there at this moment in time. I'd say first, find the vibe you want to go for, and then go ham. Figure out the rules of the color wheel and use that to help you get the vibe you want. It'll be tough, but you got this.
When it comes to colors, that's another thing in and of itself that I could talk hours and hours about. Saturated colors are so incredibly hard for me because I don't know what is too far into saturation and what is more an eye-catching saturation. There are times where I'm doing an art piece and I'm like, man, I could push the color on this so much further, but then it ends up kind of looking out of place in comparison to the rest of the colors. And if I do it with all the colors, it's a little bit overwhelming. There's definitely a beautiful balance that can be found in saturated colors that I just have yet to experience. However, monotone is kind of like where I make my bread and butter. A lot of my more community pieces, I would say, like the commissions and the pieces that I do for my community members are a lot more monotone. They lie in portraits and chibis that are black and white, tones of gray to show off the various shades and the skin tones and things like that, with these beautiful pops of white color that really highlight a lot of the assets of the characters that I am getting to draw. Monochrome is such a safe place to stay for me that in 2025 I want to branch out. I really do. When it comes to incorporating colors into my art, it kind of depends on what I'm doing. If I'm going for a more simple piece, then I'm just color picking and eyeballing the colors and shades from whatever I'm drawing subject wise. However, if I'm going for a very moody piece where like for instance my golden hour piece where I got to draw one of my long-term community members' elf character, I knew that I wanted the end result to be like this beautiful golden piece, and I had to curate my colors towards that. The character had green hair, and being able to do green and gold together wasn't really going to pan out the way that I needed it to pan out, so I ended up incorporating lots of blues and lots of like deeper greens into reds and into golds, which ended up making such a beautiful popping piece. As for actually incorporating color into my artwork and beginning to understand colors, all it takes is really practice. Being able to look at a piece of artwork or a piece of reference material and knowing the colors that are there, both in eyeball and color picking, it just takes practice. And that's just something that I just had to work on consistently. Doing various studies, focusing for a week or 2 weeks or a month to figure out colors and what looks good together and what doesn't look good together, and how to do it in certain styles, like how to make digital art look like traditional art, or how to make it look like a photo, or things like that. That just takes practice, and it's something that I do have now. It is a skill set that I have been able to refine and something that I'm very proud of. However, it just, at the end of the day, it's just practice.
In terms of colors, I do prefer to have one very saturated color when I make my pieces. Overall, I do like more desaturated colors, monotone colors. I just think it pulls everything together more uniformly when it's not so bright and the eye isn't dotting everywhere to try and figure out where to land on. Yes, I do prefer desaturated colors, and that doesn't mean that I won't use vibrant colors if the, let's say, commission calls for it.
Okay, number 3. Sketching sometimes can be, and honestly should be, the messiest part of the beginning process. The start of every piece is important. Some may use sketches and some may just use blocks of color to block poses and just kind of arrange how things should sort of look like. At the end of it all, the pre-drawing part are just ways to lay down the foundations of a piece. Lately though, it seems that people have tried to make their sketches look pretty or aesthetically pleasing to the eyes. Usually these ideas only apply if you're making something like maybe an art book and maybe you want to make things look a little clean. But in my opinion, trying to make your sketch look clean kinda takes away from your growth a bit, only if you know what you're doing. Not only are you trying to conform something that should be natural to your fingers into something that doesn't help your growth, but you're also trying to turn your art into something that should be fun and a learning process for you into a tight and restricted box. Sketches, whether it be at the beginning of a project or just for practice, shouldn't be made for eye-pleasing purposes. I mean, okay, well, technically it could, but that's not what we're talking about here. It should rather be for warm-up and like for brain dumping, composition, poses, stuff like that. I don't believe that everyone's brain knows exactly how the final piece of an artwork will look like, so there technically shouldn't be a perfect sketch. If anything, the sketch should be helping you bring to light the vision you have in your mind. A sketch should be something loose, something that shouldn't be too clean, although sometimes it can happen. Matter of fact, one of the reasons why it would maybe look clean is if it was something like a study, or maybe it's a sketch that you plan to improve later on. If not, it should feel like the art version of a random brain dump on a paper. For example, for me, I can say that I definitely should have learned the main basics of body shapes. If I had, I don't think I'd be using stick figures, but through stick figures, I can figure many things out. You know, stick figures, even though it may look a little bit off, works well for me. This method of sketching makes it easier for me to see the flow of the poses that I'm going to be drawing, see how the joints should be moved, and give me a rough estimate of how things might look. The best part for me is that it's a pretty quick way to get a rough blueprint down, and I can do multiple poses off the fly too. When I do my sketching, all I'm concerned about is getting the blueprint from my head to the media that I'm working on in a way that feels good and is comfortable to me. Now, this isn't to say clean work is bad, but all I'd like to say is that art is a form that shouldn't be constricted unless you know what you're doing or you're trying to fix a part of your artwork that you aren't really content with. All in all, just know that by making your sketches look pretty, you aren't really learning correctly as you go, and that you're making it harder to enjoy the process and maybe grow as well. Go at your own pace and draw or sketch as you like.
When it comes to actually starting a piece, I can go one of two ways. Either one, I have an idea of what I want to do with the piece and where I'm going to take it, or two, I am kind of floundering. If it's one, then I kind of get my reference materials together. I figure out the poses, then how it works and things like that. Maybe sketch it out a few times to kind of get an idea of the anatomy and how it's supposed to look and how it's supposed to feel and things like that. And then I move on with the piece, looking up references as I need to throughout the piece, things like that. Or two, if I don't know what I'm doing and I'm kind of floundering about, then I kind of just spend like an hour kind of just scrolling through poses on Pinterest or on TrueRef and things like that to kind of figure out what I want to do. I like to take into account the character itself and the history of the character and what I think would be parts of the character that I want to accentuate, whether I want to do a pinup piece of the character or if I want to focus on the hair and the length of the hair, the color of the hair, and or if I wanted to focus on the clothing, then that's how I figure out what type of poses and what type of sketch style I want to go through. When it comes to the sketch phase itself being messy or clean, it kind of just depends on the artist. Personally, for me, my sketches can range from messy to clean. It kind of just has to do with whether or not I have a clear image or not. Sometimes I can start off really messy and become a little bit more clean, or sometimes it can start clean and then end up messy. It just really depends on both my mood, what I'm doing, how into it, how warmed up I am, things like that.
In my case, I wish my sketch phase would be cleaner, but it is quite messy and all over the place. And I do 2 to 3 rounds of sketching before I can start my line art. When I'm starting a sketch, I do like to get inspiration. So I'll go onto my Pinterest, I'll find something that's the vibe of what I'm going for, or I'll look for a pose that I like, and then I'll go from there. Sometimes, very rarely, I will just start drawing. No inspiration, no Pinterest, none of that. Just go until it's done. It's rare, but I like when that happens.
Number 4. Don't be afraid to try out new things no matter how small it may be. This is the one advice that even I get hesitant about, but then when I think about it, it also brings such interesting rewards. So, as I said before, I try to make my line art be that, anime thin line type of artwork. And at that time, I was so stuck with the idea of making that line art mine, no matter what. When I realized that I could just change up my line art style, I felt like I just opened up a new door for me to explore. I was so excited only to hit another roadblock and then found another momentum once again. It was all just a big cycle. One that as an artist you don't really stop, but this is all to say that trying new things is what can make breakthroughs in your art. Whether it may be your style or maybe your workflow. Everyone is scared to make new choices and turns. But you also have to realize that if you don't try new experiences, you'll start to question and doubt yourself too. You may even start getting ideas that things don't seem fun or interesting because there's just no stimulus. Change is sometimes a scary and wobbly road, but sometimes it's also a rewarding and amazing one. It's a road that we must take, whether it be art or anything else really. So for example, for me, eventually over time I stopped using hardline brushes. Now I mainly use airbrushes and textured brushes depending on the piece I'm doing. And then that led to rarely completely drawing out line art and just color blocking. Then I one time tried out some textured brushes and now I use them more than ever. Eventually I'll try something new once again and grow from that plateau to another plateau. Just a big cycle. But then again, that's the joy of it all. No one can be perfect at anything, but when you see the growth over your journey, it gives a little boost to the heart. All of this is to say, don't be afraid to test out new things, whether it be brushes or color or anything really. You'd be surprised. Some artists' goals are just to draw cute things, some are to see how far we can push abstract ideas, and some can be to draw anatomy as firmly as we can. We all see things differently, so we will all technically draw differently. Remember the SpongeBob and Squidward art scene? We all draw different, but that's what makes art so diverse and beautiful.
When it comes to the breakthrough of my art, I feel like I'm constantly having those moments. Currently, my style breakthrough was maybe like a year ago. And even then, I recently had a chibi breakthrough where my chibi style recently changed and I just felt more in tune to it. But at the same time, with the chibi one, I kind of also pushed myself. I knew that I wanted to focus on a different style of chibi to offer. While my old chibis were very pretty, in my opinion, they just weren't hitting that sweet spot that I wanted, which was that I wanted more clear lines without them being thick, but then also more brighter colors and more a jelly-like shading style. And that's really what I wanted to focus on with the chibi. So I ended up taking a week to figure it out and figure out a style, figure out how to do it in as little time as possible because I shouldn't be taking 2 days to do a chibi. Now I'm got it down to 1 day, but with as much details that I want to push into it, that's just how it's going to be, and I'm okay with that. But outside of that, I feel like as a artist, your journey is going to be full of breakthroughs, and that's just how you learn and you grow. You get those aha moments, you get those moments where you're pushing and things look terrible and you hate it so much, and one day it just clicks, and that's just how you grow. That's what you should be striving for as an artist. Experimenting is definitely a good way to push yourself, whether it's trying new styles, new poses, practicing anatomy, practicing anything really, anything and everything. Whenever I want to level up my skills, like when I want to level up my hair, shading and rendering, I always look towards individuals that I look up to in those regards for those specific things and kind of figure out how they do it, mimic their style to the best of my ability and go, aha, that makes sense. I get it now. Even if it's not the exact replica of how they do it, if I still learn something from it, then I would say that's a success.
Absolutely. You're not going to get anywhere drawing the same things over and over without any references, without any inspiring pieces, without exploring different mediums of art and different kinds of art. You have to get out there and experience a lot of different things, experiment with a lot of different things to get your art to the next level. To level up your art, to evolve your art, you need outside influences. Regarding my style, I know I have one, but it changes a lot. So I think it would be recognizable by someone else looking at it, but for me, I wouldn't recognize, like, if I was a different person, I wouldn't be like, oh, that's, or maybe I would be. I don't feel like I have a style because it is always changing. I think that's normal for any artist. You will find something that you like from, like, bits and pieces from other media that you like, and you will try to incorporate that into your own art. So it's always evolving and changing.
All these points are things that I think younger me should have heard instead of stressing over things, Although knowing these things, I feel like I wouldn't have even took these points to heart anyways. I tend to learn the hard way, but I like to hope these points gave you some ideas and a little push to step even a bit out into experimenting. And with that, I want to say a big thank you to Kano, Dino for coming in, giving their takes on this. I know art is pretty much open in thought, so hear from different views is pretty good.
That's pretty much all I got left to say. Thank you so much for having me around. Thanks for asking me these questions and thinking about me. It means a lot. I'm glad I got to do this. I'm glad I got to share my experience and answer some questions that other people were probably struggling with, trying to figure out on their journey with art. And yeah, if you want to check out more of what I'm working on in my art, you can check me out at Blue Sky under Dino__Desu. Bye!
And that is all. Thank you for being interested in my input on these questions. I did enjoy answering them. But yeah, thank you for having me. Goodbye.
You are basically subjected to another yap session, and I hope it's giving some artists some ideas and hope. Okay, bye guys. I'll see y'all next time. See ya. Bye. Bye.